sword, something changed in him. His eyes turned red, and he started screaming like a madman, filled with an uncontrollable rage. He shouted, "Today I'm going to kill every single goblin." His voice echoed through the cave, filled with a mix of anger and desperation. Although Kang had spent more than 15 to 20 days in the tutorial zone, in reality only 7 days had passed. During these days, Kang had gathered a lot of information. First off, there were only 5 goblins in the zone. 4 of them were the small chicken leg piece goblins, which Kang managed to defeat one by one. The main problem, however, was the perverted thick goblin. He was tough, making him very difficult to defeat. Kang had defeated the small goblins and now stood face to face with the thick one. The goblin attacked Kang with his meat chopper, but Kang dodged the blow with his shield. Kang had changed a lot. Now he could see the goblin's attacks coming. He could block and dodge them. With a dead, serious face, Kang unlocked his basic swordsmanship ability and tried to cut the goblin's head off. But once again, Kang only managed to scratch the goblin's face. He was already exhausted from defeating the other 4 goblins, and now after fighting the thick goblin, he was nearly spent, shivering with fatigue. Sensing Kang's weakness, the thick goblin took advantage, swinging his meat chopper and knocking Kang's sword far away. Kang was surprised, but managed to dodge another attempt by the goblin to cut his leg. Smirking, Kang thought to himself that this goblin really enjoyed torturing him. After fighting him so many times, Kang had memorized the goblin's attack pattern. The goblin never tried to kill Kang outright. He just wanted to capture him alive and have fun torturing him. This knowledge gave Kang a small advantage. Taking that advantage, Kang quickly bent down and kicked mud into the goblin's face, causing him to cry out in pain as the dirt stung his eyes. The goblin shouted loudly in agony. Seizing the moment, Kang picked up a large stone and smashed it into the goblin's leg with great force, breaking it. The goblin screamed in pain, thrashing his meat chopper wildly. Kang circled behind him while the goblin was still reeling from the attack. By the time the thick goblin opened his eyes, it was too late. Kang, screaming, "I am the strongest! I am inevitable!" smashed the goblin's face with the stone, causing blood to gush from the goblin's mouth and nose. The thick goblin collapsed, his body trembling as he struggled to breathe. Kang was overjoyed, patting himself on the back and praising himself for his victory, but the goblin wasn't dead yet. He was unconscious. Kang's face twisted into a sinister smile, his eyes gleaming with revenge. With a chilling grin, he whispered, "I'm going to torture this bastard as much as he tortured me." And with that, Kang tortured the goblin until he was dead. As soon as the goblin died, the system congratulated Kang for clearing Stage 2. He was awarded 5 additional stat points and a reward that allowed him to choose any weapon of his choice. Kang spread his arms, looked up at the sky, and said, "This is the power of the ultimate being! Am I a god?" He then started laughing like a maniac. The scene shifted, and we saw Kang back at his house, wearing an apron and cooking in the kitchen. Despite being a big deal in the tutorial, he was still a loser at home. Living at his sister's house for free meant he had to wake up every morning and cook. Kang told himself he was cooking in celebration of clearing Stage 2. He was in a good mood, happily tasting the food, when suddenly, with a bam, Juhi burst through the door. Startled, Kang burned his mouth on the hot food. Juhi, utterly shocked, asked if Kang had really cleared Stage 2. But before he could answer, a loud noise echoed across the earth, announcing that the tutorial had been completed. Those who had completed the tutorial could now freely use their abilities in the real world. Kang and Juhi were surprised, but their surprise didn't end there. Another notification appeared stating that the dungeon was activating and the whole world started shaking. Juhi and Kang ran to the balcony, and what they saw was beyond belief. A huge, creepy black door had appeared just outside their house. The system explained that this was a dungeon, and only those who had completed any level of the tutorial would be able to use it. This dungeon had appeared all over the world. The system then displayed a countdown indicating that there were 4 years, 3 days, 57 hours, 13 minutes, and 51 seconds remaining until complete connection with the Hakin dimension. After the dungeon appeared, the whole world plunged into chaos. Kang and Juhi decided to stay inside and look for organized, reliable information. That's when Kang discovered that the tutorial wasn't actually over yet. It turned out that a lot of people had just turned 18 that day and had received the tutorial for the first time. This meant that anyone who turned 18 would experience the tutorial. The world was going crazy, but Kang wasn't paying attention to all that. He was too excited to open his status window. He dramatically extended his hand and said, "Status window, open!" But nothing happened for a few seconds. Finally, the status window appeared, but it stated that the tutorial was still in progress, so Kang couldn't use it yet. Kang was confused. But then he realized that there were a total of 8 stages in the tutorial. It had been 8 days since the first tutorial started for others, meaning they had completed it and could use their status windows. But because of his resurrection ability, Kang was stuck in stage 2. This meant that until he completed all 8 stages, he wouldn't be able to use his status window. Kang was very sad upon realizing this. He asked Juhi if she had found any information about Stage 3 online. Juhi explained that the tutorial was so difficult that very few people had reached Stage 3 or 4, and those who had completed it were keeping the information secret. They didn't want others to gain power so easily. But Kang, showing off his body and biceps, said, "I don't need that information anyway. I'm a genius, and I'll complete Stage 3 just like that." But will he really be able to do it? Let's see. The scene shifted again, showing a beautiful night with a glowing moon. In that moonlight, a glittering, delicious-looking golden liquid was falling like a waterfall. It turned out that it wasn't a waterfall at all, but a tribal man peeing, and that pee was falling directly on Kang's face. Kang was sitting quietly in a ghillie suit, and the tribal man was peeing on his head. The pee dripped slowly down Kang's mouth, and his mind filled with rage. "I will kill you! I will definitely kill you, you Then we go 10 hours back, in a flashback, to when Kang first arrived at Stage 3. As soon as he stepped into this new stage, the system welcomed him and announced that the name of the stage was Patience and Endurance Test. In any situation, the clear condition was that Kang had to kill a Gurkhan chieftain without anyone knowing. The fail condition, death. When Kang looked down at himself, he noticed he was wearing a ghillie suit. After assessing his situation, he realized this was some sort of hitman or assassin-type mission. He had never heard of a monster named Gurkhan Chieftain, so his first step was to find it. But before setting out on his mission, Kang wanted to check what rewards he had earned from Stage 2. He opened his status window and saw that he had leveled up from level 2 to level 4. His strength and agility were both at 10, stamina at 11, and magic at 14, with an additional stat point of 7. Not only that, he now had 3 abilities: basic swordsmanship, basic shield technique, and basic crossbow technique. Seeing this, Kang was amazed and shouted, "I am so rich! This is exactly how a status window should look." But Kang's happiness didn't last long. As soon as he opened the details for his basic shield and basic crossbow skills, he saw that they were practically useless. The shield skill was good enough to block local kids from bullying him, and the crossbow skill could only kill small goons. Kang's enthusiasm quickly turned to annoyance. Then, he remembered that because he cleared Stage 2, he had received a weapon as a reward. He eagerly opened his inventory and found a sword. Clicking on it, he pulled out a sparkling sword from his inventory. Kang admired the sword carefully, feeling very cool and powerful. He took the sword in his hand and started laughing like a madman, saying, "This is so awesome! I've always wanted to hold a sword like this." But the system, ever the buzzkill, notified him again. "This is just a shabby longsword." Kang's excitement turned to irritation once more, and he left in a huff. As Kang moved forward, he narrated to himself that Charlos Hathcock was a legendary sniper who had successfully assassinated a general from 1.4 kilometers away after crawling for 3 days. Kang respected him a lot. Kang had been crawling for 10 hours and had finally reached his destination, a village guarded by tribal people with drums beating in the background. He started thinking about how to kill the chieftain. There were many small huts, but Kang assumed the chief would be in the biggest one. At that moment, a guard slowly approached Kang, but Kang didn't notice him. After crawling in the grass for the past 10 hours, Kang had leaked pee, making his pants sticky and causing grass to cling to his body. Insects were biting him, and rainwater was soaking him to the ass. Kang was deep in thought when suddenly the guard appeared in front of him. The AIR seemed to leave Kang's lungs as he realized he might be caught. Kang looked up, and there stood a big, thick, muscular guard staring straight down at him. Kang thought his mission was over, but the guard slowly lifted his pants and started pissing directly on Kang's head. The guard, oblivious to Kang's presence, had simply come to pee in the grass, unaware that someone was hidden there. The pee kept flowing, dripping slowly into Kang's mouth. Kang's head was bursting with anger, his body trembling with rage. But he knew he had to stay calm, had to endure this humiliation. I have to endure, he kept telling himself. No matter what happens, I have to endure. The system had said this was a test of patience and endurance, and Kang was trying his best to hold it together. But then the guard started playing with his pee, letting it splash onto Kang's face. That was it. That was the final straw. Kang's rope of patience snapped. He leaped up, screaming, and started chasing after the guard, yelling, "I'm gonna cut your little pee-pee off!" The guard turned around in shock, seeing Kang's face still covered in his pee. Kang, screaming like an animal, charged at the guard with his sword in hand. In one swift blow, he killed the guard, cutting him clean in two. The guard's body fell to the ground, and Kang gave a satisfying smile. But his actions had alerted the other guards. They quickly surrounded Kang, more than 100 of them. Kang stood there, realizing he had really messed up. So he decided to go out with a bang. He thought, I might as well say the line I've always wanted to try. Kang screamed with all his might, "Come at me, you son of bastards!" The guards charged at him, but because of his scream, the system notified Kang that he had acquired a new skill, Lion's Roar of Rage. No one knew what skill it was, but what was clear was that all the guards tore Kang to pieces and fed him to the animal. The next day, Kang was furious. He grabbed his ghillie suit in his hand and screamed, "I will kill everyone one by one!" His scream was so intense that the system notified him that his Lion's Roar of Rage had been upgraded to D-grade. This new skill allowed him to lower the stats and morale of surrounding enemies and remove all debuffs on himself. We then see Kang throwing his ghillie suit into the air and screaming, "I will kill each and every one of you damn bastards!" before charging toward the guards. Last time, Kang had spent 10 hours hiding in the bushes, observing that in the morning, the guards would scatter to go hunting. This meant they were easier to pick off one by one in the morning. Armed with this knowledge, Kang began cutting them down one by one, making his way to the tent. In a moment, Kang was inside the tent, his face twisted into a sinister smile. He hissed, "I'm here, you bastard Gurkhan chieftain!" But what he saw next made him go crazy. Inside the tent was a fat, ugly chieftain sitting comfortably, but next to him were two mages activating spells. With a single command from the chieftain, the mages released their spells on Kang. Kang suddenly felt stuck, as if the gravity around him had increased tenfold. He couldn't move. He was trapped. Kang didn't understand how to get out of this situation until he remembered his Lion's Roar of Rage. Taking a deep breath, he screamed, "Die, you ugly fat ass!" The debuff was lifted instantly, and even the chieftain was shocked. Kang didn't waste a second. He charged at the chieftain, a satisfying smile on his face, and declared, "I am inevitable," before slicing the chieftain in two. With that, the system notified him that he had completed Stage 3 of the tutorial. Kang had gained a new ability, Physical Regeneration, which was B rank as a clear reward. And because Kang had completed Stage 3 in the shortest time possible, a new world record, he earned an additional reward, a title, the Undying League, which would increase his stats by 1. Kang paused for a moment, thinking, I completed Stage 3 in just 2 days. It had taken him weeks to complete Stage 2, and everyone knew what a mess he had been in Stage 1. Am I really a genius? He became very happy, imagining that if he kept clearing stages at this rate, he would complete Stage 4 in just a few minutes. He started fantasizing about himself as a legendary knight standing atop a slain dragon. But reality quickly caught up with him. A month had passed, and Kang still hadn't completed Stage 4. One morning, while cooking and watching the news, Kang suddenly woke up screaming. Juhi, his sister, wasn't even surprised. It had become a routine. She sighed and muttered, "There he goes again with his bullshit." She turned off the gas stove and remarked that if Kang kept waking up screaming like this, the neighbors would think she was killing him every morning. Juhi asked Kang, "What happened today? Did you slip, hit your head on a rock, and die?" She was clearly making fun of him. But then we see a very thick leg step out of Kang's room. In a loud voice, someone shouted, "I cleared it, you idiot!" Juhi, still half asleep, but then she saw Kang, his whole body wrapped in a red aura, screaming, "I just fucked everyone up!" Juhi didn't take Kang's words seriously at first, but as he stepped into the light, she was shocked, bewildered, and confused. She couldn't speak for a moment, but then she screamed, "What happened to you?" Standing in front of her was Kong, his body now swollen and twice the size it used to be, muscles bulging, his entire frame having become 10 times. After some time, we see Juhi, confused and bewildered, sitting down to have breakfast with Kong. She couldn't help but ask, "How did you become like this, Kong?" Kong, clearly very annoyed and frustrated, snapped back, "This tutorial won't let me live in peace. It's turned my life into hell." Juhi, still not fully understanding, said, "All that's fine, but day by day you're starting to look more like a criminal." Kang, with a hint of sarcasm, joked, "Wow, thanks. My little sister thinks I look like a criminal." And just like that, the two of them fell into their typical brother-sister bickering. After a while, with a serious expression, Kang explained that Stage 4 wasn't as hard as it seemed. Stage 4's theme was leadership, he began. All I had to do was lead a party, go inside the dungeon, and destroy its core. Simple, right? In the beginning, his party members seemed kind and helpful, but soon they started arguing, fighting over who would take the lead, how the resources would be managed, who would get the drops. Somehow, Kang managed to convince everyone and took over as the leader. After clearing Stage 3, he had acquired the intermediate body regeneration ability, a B-grade skill that allowed any cuts, burns, or fractures to regenerate automatically using mana. This made it easier for him to lead the group. Juhi, curious, asked, "If everything was going so well, why did it take you a month to complete Stage 4? Hearing this, Kang's mood shifted. He became depressed and didn't say anything for a moment. Then, with a deep and frustrated voice, he said, "The trouble started that night. Every time I fell asleep, my so-called party members would murder me in my sleep." Kang's voice grew louder as he recalled the events. "Those bastards were supposed to take turns keeping watch, but every single time I went to sleep, despite all I did for them, some party member would kill me in my sleep." This happened to Kang repeatedly for an entire month. He shouted so loudly in his frustration that he spilled food all over Juhi's face. Juhi, wiping her face angrily, snapped, "Eat first, then talk, you crazy bastard!" Kang, now a bit calmer, started eating slowly. After a few bites, Juhi asked, "So how did Kang manage to complete Stage 4 today?" At this, Kang finally broke down. He started laughing like a psychopath, like a man who had lost his mind, with saliva dripping from his mouth. His eyes glowed red as he said, "I just eliminated all the annoying pests and moved on." The scene flashed back to the previous day. Kang stood with his party members who, as usual, started arguing. But this time, Kang's patience snapped. All the veins in his face popped out as he shouted, "To hell with the system! To hell with leadership!" He roared so loudly, using his lion's roar, that everyone's ears almost burst. One of the party members, a witch who had killed Kang the most times, started yelling at him, asking what he was doing. But Kang was beyond reason. He pointed his sword at her chest and, with deadly eyes and a deep voice, said, "From now on, you all will follow my instructions. If anyone even itches without my permission, I will cut them from head to toe." Another party member, a yellow-haired guy named p-2, tried to protest. "Are you crazy? Why should we listen to you?" But before he could finish his sentence, Kang punched him, hard. Not just once, he kept punching him until p-2 was nearly dead. His face swelled up, his teeth were broken, and he cried so hard he couldn't even speak. He just nodded, saying, "I agree." The others were in shock, including the girl who started crying. After a moment, Kang, with that same deadly expression, repeated, "If anyone even itches without my permission, I will make sure you will beg me to die." After this, Kang went on a rampage, speed running through the dungeon. He raided it 29 times, so he remembers every route. So just in 8 hours, without sleeping, Kang slaughtering all the monsters one by one. He reached the dungeon's core and destroyed it in an instant. As soon as he did, the system congratulated Kang for completing Stage 4, awarding him a Ring of Strong Mind, a B-grade item. Kang's status window showed that he was now level 15, with strength at 17, agility at 16, endurance at 17, and magic at 15. By this time, Kang had raided the dungeon 30 times, collecting a vast amount of loot in his inventory, armor, weapons, pearls, magic stones, but he didn't even know what they were for. The Ring of Strong Mind made Kang immune to any mental attacks. Despite all the strength he had gained in the tutorial, none of it seemed to matter in the real world. But after Stage 5, Kang's body became the same as it was in the tutorial. He tried many times to use his powers, but he was still unable to do so. Right now, Kang was doing push-ups, his body now thick, muscular, and juicy. What a body. He finally completed his 1,000th push-up with one hand, sweat dripping from his body and evaporating as heat. After his push-up session, he wiped the sweat off and thought, when will I finally complete stage 8? As he pondered this, his phone rang. He thought it was just an ad, but as soon as he read the message, the ground beneath his feet trembled. There was a dungeon breakout, and the monster from that dungeon was a goblin. And this dungeon had opened right in front of the place where Juhi worked. Kong didn't waste a second. He ran to his house, searching frantically for a weapon. He looked left and right, panicking, cursing under his breath. Finally, he found a kitchen knife in the basin. Without wasting another moment, he grabbed it and dashed out of the house. A short while later, Kang stood outside Juhi's office. He took a deep breath and shouted, "It's been a while, you son of a chicken lollipop!" Hearing Kang's voice, all the goblins were immediately attracted to him. Kang was a little disappointed, thinking, as expected, I still can't use my skills. But that was a different story. Hearing Kang's outburst, all the goblins started running towards him, ready to kill. But instead of fear, Kang was filled with joy. He cursed the goblins, saying, "Why do you sound like monkeys?" Inside, Kong was cautious, realizing that this was his first time fighting real monsters outside the tutorial. He wondered if these goblins were more powerful or weaker than the ones in the tutorial. Pushing those thoughts aside, he gripped his knife like a pro and, in a single moment, sliced off a goblin's head with a satisfying smile. The goblin died instantly, and Kang, with a deadly and sinister smile, thanked all the goblins, saying, "In the first stage, I couldn't satisfy my hunger by killing only 4 or 5 goblins. Until I kill more than 100 goblins, I won't find peace." He pulled his kitchen knife out of the goblin's head and started slaughtering the goblins one by one. Meanwhile, inside Juhi's office, all the workers barricaded the entrance door with all the furniture they could find. But outside, someone was laughing like crazy, and heavy footsteps echoed as they approached the building. Everyone, including Juhi, was terrified. Juhi looked at her phone, and there was a message from Kang asking if she was still in the office. "If you are, then stay there," he wrote. Juhi was confused. Is Kong coming here? She wondered. But before she could complete her thought, that maniacal laughter grew louder, and the footsteps grew heavier. Suddenly, Kang burst through the door, smashing through all the heavy furniture. Covered in goblin blood, Kong stood there with a satisfying smile, like a psychopathic, cold-hearted murderer. Smiling, he said, "Juhi! Your big brother is here." After a moment, everyone paused for a couple of seconds, just staring at Kong. They couldn't quite comprehend who this psychopath in front of them was. Even Juhi, seeing Kang in this condition, felt embarrassed. All her friends started glancing at her, their eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. Kong stood there, a kitchen knife slung over his shoulder, scanning the office as if trying to process that Juhi actually worked here. But before he could say anything, an old man, the department head, freaked out. He shouted at Kang, "Who the hell are you? And how did you break down the door to get inside?" At this rate, all the monsters. Before the man could finish his sentence, Kang politely apologized, saying he couldn't control his powers and accidentally used too much strength. But don't worry, I've already sent all the goblins outside straight to hell. Everyone was shocked seeing the dead goblins laying lifeless on the floor. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Before anyone could say another word, Kang chuckled and said, "He saw a lot of goblins in the alley in the nearby building, so I'll take care of them too." With that, he casually rested the goblin's sword on his shoulder, turned around and walked forward with swagger. He threw a glance back toward everyone and with a smirk said, "If I don't kill those goblins, I won't sleep peacefully tonight." The scene then shifted, showing Kang tied up in bandages, with Juhi tending to his wounds. Juhi, clearly annoyed, scolded him. "We don't have much saline water left. If you were going to get this injured, why'd you go out to kill all those goblins just to look cool?" Kang patted his body and shrugged. Right now, he is just an ordinary person. He can't use the skills he had in the tutorial, so yeah, he got a few scratches here and there, but it's no big deal. Juhi, her expression serious, warned Kang. If he can't use his abilities here, that means if he die, Kang might die for real. Kang brushed it off with a smirk. Yeah, but you gotta admit, what he did was pretty cool, right? Juhi, cracking a smile, reluctantly agreed. Yeah, it was cool. And just like that, their playful brother-sister banter kicked off again. Then, with a mischievous grin, Juhi leaned in and whispered in Kang's ear that all her friends have fallen for Kang after that cool act he pulled. They're driving her crazy, begging her to introduce them to Kang. Hearing this, our single virgin Kang started blushing and drifted off into his thoughts. But night soon fell, and as Kang went back to sleep, he was instantly greeted by the same voice, welcoming him to Stage 5. The voice announced, "The theme of this stage is wisdom." Kang didn't quite understand what wisdom meant in this context, but before he could wrap his head around it, a group of thick, juicy, plot-twisting mommy milkers girls appeared around him. They asked with seductive voices, "Are you the succubus?" Kang was utterly confused. Then the system notified him that the objective of this stage was to identify and kill the succubus hiding among these women. However, the catch was that once Kang discovered the succubus's true identity, he would become its first target. Hearing the word succubus, Kang's imagination ran wild. In his mind, he imagined a thick, juicy woman, seductive like a vampire, calling out to him. He remembered from games that a succubus drains men's juice, and now, with all these beautiful women in front of him, his single status ignited his inner passion. Before Kang could get too lost in his fantasies, a young, cute girl approached him. With a seductive voice, she asked, "What do you think? Who among us is the succubus?" For the first time, Kang found himself face to face with a girl who was not only cute, but also talking to him. He blushed, stammering, I don't know." But before he could say anything more, the system notified him that his ring of strong will was blocking a mental attack. Kang instantly realized that this girl was the succubus trying to control his mind. As night fell, Kang sat by the campfire, reflecting on the stages he had completed. Stage 1 was a nightmare of an inferno circus. Stage 2 was a brutal battle with goblins. Stage 3 had him crawling through mud for 10 hours only to get peed on by a monster. And Stage 4 was a month-long group project from hell. Kang chuckled to himself, thinking, finally I can enjoy something interesting after all that. The guy who had been cursing God all this time suddenly found himself thanking God, saying, "Thank you, God. Finally I can have some fun with these beautiful women." He was laughing so perverted that he had to control himself, thinking, no, I need to keep my cool. If the succubus finds out, I'm done for. And since the succubus only targeted men and Kang had mental protection, it meant that the succubus was toying with the other male NPCs. So for now, he decided to get some sleep. Tomorrow, he would make friends with the other female NPCs and finally defeat the succubus. But as soon as he woke up, he realized he wasn't in the tutorial anymore. He was back in Juhi's office. Startled, he shouted, waking up. Everyone around him cheered, congratulating him for heroically defeating the goblins. Even the male workers had become fans of Kang. They told him the good news. The army had arrived, but Kang wasn't in the mood to listen. He was still furious, angry at the succubus for almost getting the better of him. He muttered to himself that the succubus must have figured out that he knew her identity